Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for having us today. My name's Rachel Foley. I'm one of the three attorneys that'll be presenting today. With me is Joanne Stutz and Jill Olson. All three of us are consumer bankruptcy attorneys here in Kansas City, Missouri. We work on both the Kansas and Missouri side, and we just wanted to bring some information to you today about your credit. How to get it back on track, how to build credit if you don't have credit, and how credit affects everything. And maybe a bankruptcy may be needed to increase a security clearance if that's what you're looking to do post-discharge and getting back into government service. So with that, let's get started. And in your materials, when you view this presentation, there'll be several materials handed out to you. If after that you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to KCMBF or one of the attorneys here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So let's start. The whole thing about credit is dealing with a credit score. You hear everything about a FICO or a credit score. And who is FICO and what the heck is he doing, to everything in my life? Well, Fair, Isaac and Company is the purpose behind the acronym of FICO. And it controls everything. And as more and more information comes out and more regulations occur, FICO is allowed to dictate prices of such things as insurance. If you're driving, you could be the best driver in the world. You could be 40, 50 years old, never had a ticket, never had an accident. But if your FICO score is low, then your insurance rate's going to go up. And the states allow that. The insurance commissioners of the different states allow that to occur. Why? Because they say if you're low FICO, you're a risk. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's what we're dealing with in the law at this particular time. Jobs used to be that some employers would run a background check and of course a credit report, but that's usually for high entry jobs, security clearances, doctors, lawyers, scientists, that type of thing, not everyday workers at Walmart. And now some workers just getting an average day-to-day job are having to go through a screening, which includes a credit report. And so when that FICO comes back, there have been times that somebody has been denied a job just based solely on their FICO score, not their skill set, not their experience, solely on their FICO score. Interest rates on mortgages, on vehicles, on loans, whatever it is. If your FICO score is low, your interest rate is high. It could be anywhere from 12 to 27% interest, which just is ridiculous. But that's what it is. So there's a phrase or a statement that we hear quite a bit in dealing with consumer bankruptcy is that it's very expensive to be poor. And that's very true. And if you're in the middle class or a lower income range, you probably already know this because the interest rate is holding you down and everything seems to be going against that. So that's the purpose of our discussion today, is see what we can do to increase your FICO score and level the playing field just a little bit. All right. So the first thing is we call this FCRA. You may hear FCRA if you deal with attorneys or somebody who discusses credit. All that means is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act is the area in the law that says what can appear on your credit report and what can't appear on your credit report. What can a creditor do? Can a creditor just say, hey, you are a deadbeat and you owe $50,000 for this particular debt? No, they can't. They have to be within the guidelines and prove up what you owe. And you have the right to know what's in your file. So that's why we want to talk about Fair Credit and Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, because you have certain viable rights under these two acts. You have a right to know what's in your credit file. You have the right to be told if something is being held against you. So that's the reason why if you go to apply for a car and the lender denies you credit, they send you a letter that says, hey, we're denying your credit based on this particular issues or these particular issues in your credit report. You have the right to ask for your credit score. So if something comes up, you have a right to ask for your credit score. And we're going to talk about how to get your credit score and look at your credit score, so you are an active participant. And people sometimes think, a lot of my clients think, oh my gosh, my credit score's in the toilet. You know, it's in the 400s, the lower 500s. I'll never get out of this. Why, you know, why even bother about this? Well, think of a FICO score as a living, breathing entity. It changes characters every 30 to 45 days. So as things come in and are reported to your credit bureau, your credit report through the credit bureau, that entity changes. So your score can go up and down every 30 to 45 days. So don't lose hope. You have ways to change the score and to keep it on the upward path towards a great credit score. You have to request, you have the right to request a free copy every year. And in your materials here, it's annualcreditreport.com. annualcreditreport.com. And so with that you go to that site, and the link is in here. And that's the government site where you can pull all 3 credit bureaus for free once a year, and it's a rolling 12 months. So if you pulled it in March of 2021, then you can pull it in March or later of 2022. If you have something already in your possession, such as Discover Card and some Capital One counts, they now give you access, I think it's to Experian. So they give you access to 1 or 2 of your credit reports that you can actually pull. And then we'll talk about another service where you can look at a projected credit report as well. You have the right to dispute the facts. So let's say somebody says you owe $50,000 and they're just really bad at math and you only owed $5,000. You have the right to dispute that. Or let's say if you're a junior or the 3rd or the 4th, we see this in generational names, or you're named the same name as your mother, and on the female side as well. So if you have similar names to your parents, you may have what's called a merged credit report. So they're reporting somebody else's information on your credit bureau. You have the right to dispute that and have that removed from your credit report. So any clients that I get in that are generational, or their name is very similar, or if I get a John Smith, which I've had clients, John Smith, then I tell them, you've got to track your credit report because you may have other people reporting on there. If your social security number is off by 1, sometimes you get somebody else's information that's nowhere close to your name, but the social security number is close. It's off by 1 or 2 digits. So be aware of that. Take a look at your credit on a regular basis. You can place a freeze on your account. Let's say that you're traveling outside the country and you want to make sure, and you're not going to use credit while you're out of the country, you want to put a freeze on the account, you can do that. You can freeze the account or take it off. Or if you believe that you're been hit by identity theft, you want to put a freeze on the account and hold everything. And what that does is that tells any creditors trying to obtain credit or issue a line of credit to you that your account is on hold and nobody can touch it. Your employer does not have the right to pull your credit report unless they have permission. Joanne, did you have a question or statement?
Yeah, the freeze on the account. I don't know how many people live in Kansas, but you've probably heard about the hacking of the Department of Labor's computers, and somebody was making false claims on other people's names. I mean, our firm got hit. About 6 of us had false claims made in our names against our employment accounts. So the very first thing they told us to do was freeze our credit report accounts. So,
good point.
Yeah, it's, anytime you know that something's going on, somebody might have hacked your information or whatever, the first place you go is, you let the KDOR know that they made a mistake and there's a problem, but they pretty much ignored that. But placing the freeze on my credit account probably did more to help me than anything else.
And another way, thank you. And another way to put a freeze is calling all three credit bureaus and saying, hey, I need to place a fraud alert on the account. So you can do it two ways. You can either freeze the account or put a fraud alert out, and they'll put a freeze on the account immediately across the board there. Also, if you have a credit card, you probably have a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, then you can have an app for your credit card. Most credit cards and most banks now have the ability through the app to freeze the account. So if you've lost your card or misplaced it, you know, St. Anthony I make him work overtime every day because I'm always losing something. But if I cannot find my wallet, or I lose my card, or I've misplaced it 9 times out of 10, I'll put a freeze on that particular account until I find it, and then take the freeze off. So be aware of that as well. So you can immediately stop any activity on that particular card.
Also, Rachel, real quick, before we leave this topic, there have been, in the past 5 years, there have been 2 hacks that have hit the federal government. And federal government numbers have been hacked. And I, of course, as a former federal employee, have been notified both times that my Social Security number was compromised. One of the things that the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, has offered is a free monitoring of this to anybody who was affected by that. So for anybody who's a former service member, they might have the opportunity, if they were in the OPM hack, to get that free service offered to them, which will help them monitor their accounts for this type of fraud as well. And that's a huge tool that is offered for free to anybody who was subject to the federal government hacks.
Great, thank you for that. So that's a great service if you were part of that, to sign up for that. So just going back for a second to the employer, nobody can pull your credit report without your permission. So if you're applying for the job and the employer says, hey, we need to pull your credit report, if you don't give permission, they can't pull it. But unfortunately, for some of those instances, we're finding that if you refuse to do it, that you may not be offered a job. So I don't know of any cases where somebody's refused and litigated that issue, but in the general realm of things, be aware of that. The employer must have your permission to pull your credit report. All right. So if anybody violates any section of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you can hire an attorney and seek damages to go after that. So this and the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act both have damages clauses in the act itself, or the legislation. So you can go after people for violating this. And like with everything else in the law, we want to know what has happened to you. So if you're a victim of somebody abusing this act, start making a journal of what's happened, what's occurred along the way, how has it affected you, and start making what we call a contemporaneous record, meaning that you make this record while it's fresh in your mind. So when you go to see somebody, you'll have the outline of the history of what has happened and what you would like to see to get back on track. So the fair going on with the Fair Credit Reporting Act, annualcreditreport.com is the way to order it. Some people don't like to order it through the website itself, and that's okay. Some people really just do not trust the internet system. So we put in the phone number for you. And when you put in the phone number, you will have to verify who you are, your date of birth, your social security. They may ask you if you have a mortgage, who the mortgage is, or they'll ask you a question that you took out a loan for a vehicle back in 2005. It's usually within the last 10 years of something that's occurred on your credit and or your address. So, but let's say that you don't have a permanent address and you haven't had one for the last 5-10 years. Try and have some other information ready so they can verify your account. All right. So the identifying information in there. So we'll move on to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So this is when these creditors, either they do it through themselves, such as Target, Capital One, any of the hospitals that you go to, etc., or they do it through a third-party collectors, such as Kansas Counselors, Berlin Wheeler, that type of thing. So a third-party collector is somebody who works for the original lender and attempts to collect the debt. And if you've had any past debt at all, you know that these creditors, if they're medical creditors, they're the worst collectors on the face of the planet. And then you add the third party collector and they're just off the chain. And again, there's certain rules and regulations that they have to adhere to. They just can't call you at all hours of the night. They can't threaten to put you in jail. They can't do certain things. Now, what they are not supposed to do legally and what they do are two different things. And you and I both know that, if you've ever had a collection call. But the more you know about your rights, the more you can stand up to these guys and start, again, making a log about what's going on and seek damages for anybody who violates this right. So one of the things that I see that happens a lot, and you may experience this or have experienced this, when a spouse dies or a parent dies, the collector comes in and tells the spouse, you're responsible for your spouse's death or debts. And or a child, an adult child, you have to pay your parents' debt. Well, no, you don't on both occasions unless you're legally responsible for this debt. And they will keep hounding you to say you're supposed to pay this. Or if your child is over the age of 18 and got themselves into a mess, unless you co-signed for that debt, you're not responsible for it. So be aware of it. Just because somebody says you're responsible, don't immediately jump. Ask for verification. What is this debt? How did I get tied to this debt? Show me evidence I am financially responsible to this. We've seen creditors through third-party collectors threaten to put people in jail. I've had collectors call me and threaten to put me in jail and tell me a sheriff's out in the parking lot. And I said, great, let me go meet them. I'd be happy to talk to them. It's usually these third-party collectors. A lot of them are not in the United States. A lot of them are calling from overseas. It doesn't matter whether they're in the US or out of the US. You do not have to pay somebody else's debt, and they cannot make threats against you to collect a debt that you do owe. A debt collector may not call you at work unless you've given permission for them to speak to you at work, or they know that you can take calls at work. But most people who work for an employer, such as Target or Walmart or the VA hospital, generally you're not supposed to be taking personal calls on the employer time. So they are not supposed to be calling you at work. And if they do, to harass you, and they can only call to say, hey, does so-and-so, are they still at this employment? After that, they're not supposed to continue to call and harass. Another favorite trick of theirs is to call like in the wee hours or, dark 30 or at midnight. And they call to harass you. They may only call between 0800 and 2100 local time. So it has to be, the creditor could be on the East Coast calling us here in Kansas City. They have to know that what the local time is, and they can only call between that range. If they call outside of that range, then they're in violation of the act. A debt collector, again, may not harass or abuse you. I've had clients come in tears because the collector, told the dad he was a deadbeat dad, and that the collector was going to report to family court and take away his kids. They cannot do that. And you should not have to tolerate that. So know your rights and be comfortable that you do have rights in these collection matters. Again, the debt collector must validate the debt. When you get a collection letter and it says, hey, I'm from Joe Schmuckatelli and I'm collecting on behalf of Discover Card and you owe $8,000 and you've never had a Discover Card, at the bottom of that letter, there should be a little warning that says, hey, if you dispute this debt or anything related to this collection letter, you have the right to validate within 30 days. And it's 30 days of receipt, but we've seen where letters are forward dated. or not forward dated, pardon me, backdated. So they tried to eat into that 30 days. We see where they put the print of the language in very, very small font, such as 6 or less font. It has to be in a readable font, and it has to be in a prominent placement. And if they don't do that, they're in violation. If you call to dispute the debt, it'll say, do I need to call or do I need to write? It doesn't matter. If you call or write, that's disputing the debt. And they must tell you who owns the debt, and they must validate that you owe the debt. And during that time, no negative reports can appear on your Fair Credit Report or on any of the bureaus. So be aware of that as you're going through this, when you're disputing this. And again, as attorneys, we recommend you keep everything in writing. Keep a log. What date and time did you call? If you can get an employee ID number, anything about that call that you can write down and make a log of, because I can guarantee you you're being recorded and that they have a history on that. And if it comes down to a lawsuit, that gives us an idea of how to pull that information and use it as evidence.
Also, if you're requesting the validation of this debt from a creditor, one of the things I suggest you request is that they provide you with a copy of any document signed by you showing that you requested the credit card, or that you purchased the car, or that you sought treatment at a hospital. You're looking for them to provide you with something that has a signature by you, evidencing your obligation.
That's a great point. And once you get it, if it doesn't look like your signature, you want to keep that. Keep the envelope that the response came in. Always keep the envelopes for the collection letters, the letters themselves, any responses, and the envelopes themselves. And keep them together in one area. So great tip, Jill. Thank you.
Let me go back and just say one other suggestion. Rachel, you suggested that where you've said correctly that the debt collector is probably recording the conversation. If you're using a smartphone, you should be. There's nothing that says you can't record it as well.
That is correct. Yes. But I issue a word of caution. You can record it, and oftentimes, I advise my clients to do that. But be aware that in some states, if the creditor is calling from New York and calling to Missouri, Missouri is a one-party state. So unless I go into the federal courthouse or some other type of, like the NSA or some other type of agency that says you can't record in it, I can record any conversation because I give myself permission. But when you're on your phone, there's a body of law that says it can get tricky if you have a collector from another part of the state. But if they are recording, which 99.9% of the time they are, then you can record because they've already given permission to record. If you hear clicking in the background, they are recording. And they have to issue a statement right up front. We are a collector and we're recording this conversation for, there's usually a long list of reasons why. So yes, on your smartphone, hit that record button. If you use a system, it's called Otter, OTTER. It's a new artificial intelligence recording transcript that is also used for Zoom now, but you can also have it on your phone. It not only records the conversation, but it provides a pretty accurate transcript. So that way you can go back over and read over the conversation and see if they gave you any hints about what the conversation had. Again, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and Fair Credit, there are damages if somebody violates the law. So the best thing that you can do to arm yourself is gather the evidence and keep a journal, a contemporaneous journal of what's taking place. So no credit. No credit, bizarrely, acts worse than filing a bankruptcy or bad credit. So if you have no credit, it's like you don't exist at all. You're in the matrix, but you're behind the matrix and nobody can see you. So what do you have to do? You have to start building your credit somehow, some way. So a couple of different ways that Joanne and Jill and I have talked about through our practices is one, you can take out a loan at a credit union. Credit unions are great for newcomers to the credit world or trying to rebuild your credit. Take out a loan and then repay that debt to the loan. And then each time you pay it back in a timely manner, you start to build your credit score and you build a credit relationship with that particular credit union. So the credit union that immediately comes to mind that I'm a member of and have been since I was born was Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal, as far as I know, is now open to all branches, and it's open, I think, to veterans and then members of their family as well. So you can go to Navy Federal and ask them for a starter loan to build your credit. And so you can take it out and pay it back. And I think, Jill, that you told me, correct me if I'm wrong, that the person took out the loan and then just used that loan to repay the loan. Didn't use the proceeds of the loan, but just paid it back.
Correct. They borrowed $1,000, immediately put the $1,000 in the bank account at Navy Federal, which Navy Federal then debited every single month. So the money was there. They had to, of course, put in a little bit of extra money towards the end of the loan because the loan is charging interest. But the payments came out automatically every 2 weeks, and they were establishing credit without ever having to. So they didn't spend the money; they just put the money in there and used it to basically repay, but to establish that good credit.
So that's one way to do it. Another way is if your local Academy Bank, which is located in Walmarts, there's some of the Walmarts around the city, but not a Walmart product. So what you do is you deposit, and you can do this at any bank, any credit union, deposit $300, $500, and you get a secured credit card, and then you charge it up and pay it off. So what I do is I have my clients set this up, and they charge either the gas or the groceries, concentrating on one particular item. And then whatever average they charge per month, I have them set up on auto pay out of their bank account to say, okay, on every pay period, it's going to pay this amount. So there's funds going automatically to this account. But the best thing you want to find, whether it's Capital One also has a secured credit card, or the banks or the credit unions or Navy Fed, is you want to make sure they report to the bureaus. At least 2 out of the 3, but all 3 is better. So Academy Bank reports to all 3 each month. So that FICO score that I told you about is a living, breathing entity. It's changing as you charge up and pay off in a timely manner. That FICO score starts to climb. So check those entities out and see. I know Navy Fed is really good about reporting every 30 days to all 3 credit bureaus to show the current activity. And I like the fact that you can set up your savings account, your checking account, and the credit card account or loan account, and they can automatically, you give them permission, they'll automatically withdraw, as Jill said, for those payments. Seek a cosigner on the account. I have people do it either way. Some people get their parents to co-sign, and then they set up automatic payments. That's what I encourage, is automatic payments, so they're aware that they're paying that and it's building that good credit each month. Some use their children, adult children, but I caution against that because I have a client right now that went and purchased a $300,000 home. Their child worked really hard, and at the age of 21, she co-signed for this home because her credit score was over 700. They got this, and now they're in bankruptcy, and this adult daughter had to file bankruptcy as well because there were other debts she co-signed, and the parents just couldn't keep it up. So I caution people when using any type of cosigner in that situation. If that's all you have and it's a small enough debt, it's a great way to get started. But I would keep the debt very small if that's where you're going to use. We talked about seeking a loan, paying it back. This is something that is becoming more familiar and gaining popularity. It's through nonprofit lending agencies, and they do what's called microloans. And so they're generally community-based. generally looking for some type of specific community. So whether it's a gay and lesbian community or a minority community or veteran community, these are lending groups of individuals who come together and they issue loans to one another and then work towards paying off the debt together. And then in this particular instance, the Mission Asset Fund, they get outside resources to donate or lend to their agency. So they underwrite is the word I'm looking for, the particular loans. And so they work together as a community to issue these loans and then work together to make sure that the debt is paid back. So I don't know a lot about this. I know that Kansas City had one that is Midtown through Chess. Chess Inc. was tied into a micro-lending system. I'm not sure if they still do. I couldn't get a call back before today's call. But CHES Inc., Chess Inc., you may want to call them if you're interested in getting a microloan if they're doing that program anymore. Okay, so bad credit. How does it come about? This FICO score, and why does it hold you hostage? What comes into it? So there's different things that come into play here. How much are you owed on, or how much are the lenders owed on each of the accounts? Your payment history, your new credit, the length of the credit history, and the credit mix. Credit mix is, do I have student loans, car loans, mortgages, you know, that type of thing. The payment history, do you pay on time? Have you paid on time? That is crucial because sometimes lenders may look at the FICO score, but they look at this and say, okay, you're overextended on credit, but you've made a payment each and every time. So I'm going to take a chance on you. So make sure those payments are on time. And then the amounts owed. If you have a line of credit, try and keep each line of credit below 33 1/3%. So basically think of it in slices of 3. So if you have a $300 line of credit, you never want to carry a balance of $100 or more. And right now, if you're trying to build credit, you shouldn't carry any balance over. But most assuredly, do not carry over more than $100 per month. And keep in mind, each month that goes by, if you don't get that down below 100, once that interest rate accrues or comes about to add to the account, now you're popped over the 100 and your FICO is going to go down. So it's all about moving the numbers around. So keep your balances low and pay your timely payments. And those are the two factors that are really going to make your FICO climb in a timely manner. Okay, rebuilding credit. So slow and steady wins the race. If you have bad credit, you didn't get into it most assuredly overnight, unless you had perfect credit and something blew up, such as a divorce or hospitalization, or you were deployed to the front and all of a sudden your credit went on hold. So, but most of the time we get into debt overnight. It's slow but sure. We think that I will pay this debt down and then something else, life gets in the way and it starts building up. And then the kids go to the hospital and we're paying a little bit there, but that starts to build up. So slow and steady wins the race in rebuilding the credit. You want to work to remove the old debts. So reporting, they can report on your credit report for 7 years. Bad debt lives for 7 years. And it's 7 years from the date of the first incident. So the very second you fail to make that timely payment, that 7 years starts occurring. But the difference between bad debt and negative reporting on your credit report in bankruptcy is very clear. Bad debt is like a wound that you put a Band-Aid on and then every 30 days you rip that Band-Aid off. That's what bad credit is. It just reopens that wound and it just doesn't go away. It doesn't do anything but bad things to your FICO score. Your FICO score continues to go down. Bankruptcy cauterizes that wound, meaning that it heals it, it seals that wound and it stops it. So bankruptcy can report for 10 years from the very second that you file bankruptcy. And so what happens is every month that goes by, bad credit pulls your credit score down, bankruptcy, your credit score starts to go up because you've stopped the bleeding with the bankruptcy. But bankruptcy isn't for everybody. It's not the dream, solution to everybody's problem. So if you have a couple of old debts, first look to see if the old debt is still reportable. If it's a 10-year-old debt, it should not be reporting. And if it's 10 years old, it's probably past the statute of limitations, which is just a legal term to say, hey, they can't sue you, they can't come after you. So you have two timelines there, 7 years of reporting, and then depending on the debt, it's 5 to 10 years to sue to collect. So be aware of that. If it's
let me add a little bit, if I might.
Yeah.
That 10-year time frame to collect may be subject to various other states' statute of limitations. Ohio, I think, has like a 15, 16-year statute of limitations. So you have to be careful that when you're trying to remove an old debt based on the statute of limitations, meaning you can't do anything after 10 years, you need to be looking at the state that the agreement, the governing agreement says is the controlling law. Now, I didn't say that very well, but.
No, I think you did. That's a very good point. There's always the facts that you have to look at, but under the regulations, bad debt can only be reported for 7 years. Right. And so you still may be able to get it pulled off, even though they can collect out of state, you still may be able to get it pulled off after the 7 years. So be aware of that, be involved in your credit report. So if the old debts are low enough, look to get them paid off and taken care of. If bankruptcy is not for you, try and take care of the old debts. I'm not sure, something came to, before I get there. Another thing that can affect it, let's say that you owe $5,000 worth of debt. So $5,000 worth of debt for some of my clients is a game changer. And they qualify through legal aid to file bankruptcy. And it really is, $5,000 is just $1 million to somebody else. It's all about relativity. But if in your world, $5,000 is a lot of money, but you think you can pay maybe $2,500, you might be able to do debt settlement. So debt settlement is where you say, hey, I'll offer you 40 cents on the dollar, and maybe you settle at 50 cents on the dollar and settle the debt. Now, be aware that bad debt, again, is reporting to your credit report. And so that bad debt is something that pulls your credit score down, whereas bankruptcy pulls it down initially, it starts to grow afterwards. But you can offset the bad debt of settling the debt by issuing good credit and keeping timely payments. But be aware of debt settlement because there's a tax implication with that. So I try and talk to my clients about that. And I don't know, Jill, if that's where you were going. If you write off $2,500 worth of bad debt, they can issue, the lender, say Cap One, will issue what's called a 1099-C, and you'll get taxed on that. So depending on your tax bracket, that may not affect you any way or shape or form, but be aware that there's implications with it. Jill?
I just wanted to point out while we're talking about this, that I've heard a lot of people through the years say comments of things that they've heard that are wrong. It's this folklore about paying creditors that exists out there. And I've heard people advise other people, well, they can't sue you. As long as you pay them something every month, they can't sue you. So if you just send your creditor $5 a month, they can't file suit. That's incorrect. That is not legally correct. But it's one of those folklore myths that perpetuates out there that people believe because they've heard other people pass it along as if it's gospel. And so when you're looking at whether or not you can afford to pay these creditors and you're thinking that you're not going to get sued because you're paying something, that's where I think a lot of people reach that tipping point of it's just too overwhelming. And they come in and they're just upset because they're like, well, I was paying them. Why are they suing me? I was paying them. And so I want you to anybody that's listening to this to understand that, yes, you're good. We understand that you were acting in good faith and you were paying something, but unfortunately the law says that they don't have to not sue you if you're not making the minimum that's legally required to pay them.
Great point. And that makes me think of two things that I'm sure all three of us have run into. One is a client comes in and said, I don't know why I'm being sued. I'm part of a debt settlement program. They said I'm good to go. Why? They can't sue me. Yes, they can sue you. There's nothing in the law that says these creditors have to work with a debt consolidation company. So be aware of that. If you're not paying enough to pay down the debt, or they can't take care of the debt straight away with a particular creditor, you're still liable to be sued. So I hate debt consolidation. It works for a very few minority members of that, or numbers, I should say, for that particular thing. The other thing is a divorce decree. This is another thing that clients come in and they're just horrified. I paid an attorney to get a divorce, and my ex is supposed to pay my Discover card, and he or she hasn't done it. Now I'm being sued. Well, unfortunately, Discover doesn't have to rely upon that divorce decree. It holds no water. If you're the one who signed that debt, you're the one who's legally liable for it. Now you can go after the ex, but if the ex has filed bankruptcy or the ex just can't pay it, you're not going to get blood out of a turnip. So you're going to be stuck with that. So be aware of debt consolidation and anything that you agree to in a divorce decree.
And I see that a lot as suing people for car loans. My ex bought that car. I just co-signed, and my ex was responsible to pay for it in bankruptcy. Why are you suing me? Or in bankruptcy, in divorce? The divorce decree says my ex has to pay that. And it's like, you're on the contract. And that is primarily one of the biggest things that I see when I sue people in state court is a divorce decree where the divorce attorney did not explain to the person that they remained liable on this debt, regardless of what the divorce decree said.
So Jill and Joanne, does it matter? This is another one I hear. I'm not number one on the contract. I'm just number two. Does that carry any weight?
No.
Not at all.
It doesn't matter if you're first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. If you've signed that contract, you're liable.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
They're going to come after you. So be aware before you lend your good credit to somebody else.
Correct.
One of the things that I use with my clients, and take this with a grain of salt, because some of my colleagues in town that do solely credit reporting and credit collection just cringe every time I say this. But this has been a useful tool for my clients. Credit Karma. Credit Karma is a totally free service. You can get the app on your phone, and it gives you a look into all two of your credit bureaus, pardon me. TransUnion is one of them. So TransUnion, most of the creditors report to because it's cheap. They don't have to pay a high cost to do it, and so they report to TransUnion. So it's a good way to see what is reporting on your credit report. It's not always accurate, but it gives you an idea. So don't take it as the gospel, just take it as, hey, this is a starting point. They will give you your FICO score, but it's a ballpark. You're not on a particular base. You're just in the ballpark. So it could say that you're at 625, but your actual credit score is 675. So just take it as with a grain of salt to say, okay, what's reporting now and what changes are there? So they've done a great job of issuing recommendations or changes that have come about on your credit, and recommendations to maybe expand your credit score. So they'll say, hey, it looks like you're qualified for this card, and it's zero annual fee, and it's reports, but the interest is like 27%. And when you're starting out, you're going to get hit with a higher interest rate. But you may take a look at that and see. But again, don't take it as the gospel. It's just a tool to help you get to the FICO home run and getting your credit score up. Okay.
Okay, let me interject something here. We're talking about rebuilding credit and getting credit cards. The best thing you can do is, if you get a credit card, is charge only as much as you can afford, so that when the bill comes, you pay it in full. The interest rate on a credit card is horrendous. And, I've had people come in and say, well, I'm current. Are you paying that credit card in full? No, I just sent them the minimum payment. You're not current. You're just digging a hole that you'll never get out of, and they know that. So, you've got to be real careful when you use a credit card that you're basically borrowing against yourselves. And so you have to make sure that you're going to have the money when the bill comes to pay that in full. Don't rely on you only have to pay a minimum.
And that's a great point. And that's one of the reasons why I tell my clients, if you're going to take this step, you need to set up a payment from every paycheck, because life gets in the way. And if you can set up a payment every paycheck, that you sit down on that Friday night or Thursday night, whenever you get paid, and you pay that bill and make sure that money goes out, you start to learn how to live on the net proceeds from that. Because
and here's one of the easiest ways to do that is to rebuild. Let's say that you have a gas bill or an electric bill, and you're set up on an auto pay and on an equal billing as well. So that you know that 12 months out of the year, you've set up equal billing, and so that your gas bill is going to be $67.80 a month. You set it up to hit your credit card, and then you set up your bank account to pay your credit card $67.80 a month. It's a fixed amount. You know exactly how much it is. So you know you're going to pay that in full every month. But that reports like clockwork as good credits every single month. But it's an amount, and you're never going to get hit interest. And that's the only thing you use that credit card for. It's an easy way to make sure, but it's a fixed bill. So it's not like you're charging up, food or groceries or things like that, which are always going to be a variable amount. It's also a way to make sure that you know exactly how much you need to set aside every month.
And if they don't, that's a great point. And if you're not already set up on level billing, and for some reason the utility company won't do it for you, you can do it yourself. I do that with my office here. So I pay, I think it's $80 or $90 a month to City of Independence. And so the higher months that it needs it, I already have a balance there that it draws from, a credit. And for the months that I don't hit that $90, it goes into a slush fund and it waits for those higher months. So you can call the utility company, ask them for what your last year's rate was, and then divide it by 12. And that way you have a good idea and put yourself on a level pay, as Jill suggested, and that will rebuild your credit. You'll be amazed at how quickly your credit score will start to build if you have no credit, or recover if you have bad credit. So one of the things early on in my career, I used to work for the United Auto Workers, and I left there to start on my own. And I got a call from a commanding officer one day, and they said, "Hey, we see your name, and I want to send over one of my people to file bankruptcy." And I thought, well, this is odd. Growing up as a dependent, I just thought that was kind of odd for a CO to be calling me. And so what he wanted to do is he wanted to promote this particular person, but they couldn't do it because of the security clearance. His FICO score wasn't good enough because he was overextended in debt. He was timely in his payments, but he was just overextended, and there was no way he could get out in time to get this promotion. So we filed a bankruptcy for him, and we cleared that debt. And so that's when I learned about bankruptcy actually being able to increase your ability to increase your security clearance. So in here, we look at the purpose of the security clearance, as you probably already know, is to see how big of a risk are you? Are you going to be open to foreign influences, or influences within the US? Are you going to basically be on the take? Why should we offer you this ability to certain information if you can't handle your own finances? Again, some of this makes sense, some of it doesn't. There are people, I don't care how far in debt they are, they're never going to sell out their country. They're never going to take that and cross that line, but the system is what it is. So we have to work within the system. So what this bankruptcy will do is clear those debts so you can increase your security clearance. But is that guaranteed? Absolutely not. There is really nothing guaranteed anymore, except that at some point we're all going to die. but I can't even guarantee you're going to pay taxes at this point. But what I can tell you is we're all going to die at some point. So we have to look at the underlying cause of your debt going into the bankruptcy. Did you commit fraud? And fraud is a very high standard that you have to jump into in the bankruptcy court. But there are some people who just out and out committed fraud. They lied on the application for the credit card. They used somebody else's name or somebody else's social security number. There's a whole bunch of different things that can go into it. For the security clearance, was it willful negligence? Where you flat broke and you took out a line of credit to go to vacation in Costa Rica? Or were you flat broke and you took out a line of credit to take care of your child who had to go into the hospital? Both incurred debt, both were willful, but negligence, that would be viewed in a different light than going on vacation to Costa Rica. So it all depends on the underlying facts. Now, I can tell you in the 20 some odd years of practice, I've only had one, maybe two clients that were completely fraudulent in their transactions. Other than that, you just really, I don't see it in my practice. So we really kind of look at it. And then I always tell my clients, if they come in, I had one guy who was discharged, and he was trying to get his security clearance because he was going back into an intelligence factor. And so what we did is we had to put him into a 13 because the employer said, listen, we'll put you through and we'll increase your clearance. We can get this through, but you have to be in a Chapter 13 and you have to show that you're willing to try and pay your debts. Now, his payback of his debts was minimal because he just wasn't making a lot of money. But they took that as a good faith effort to control it, and he could not take out, or you're not supposed to take out, any other credit during bankruptcy. And so when we put him into the Chapter 13, during this Chapter 13, where he was in it for 3 to 5 years to try and pay back the debt, his security clearance was increased and he was able to keep this job, and now he's had several promotions from there. So I recommend, if you're doing it specifically to increase your security clearance, you want to know what's going to happen with this. Do you have to, insurance brokers, if you work in a fiduciary capacity, such as an insurance broker, you have to file a 13 and you have to pay back all your debts. At least for the last couple of that I've handled. So be aware of what the purpose of your security clearance is and what is the credit, or what is the employer going to require of you.
And we just had a question, Rachel, to ask about the difference between 7 and 13. And really quickly, a 7 is a process where you file the bankruptcy and you do not repay any of your debts. You're basically saying, I don't have the capability to repay them. You file, you meet with the trustee who questions you about your schedules, and then you get a discharge. 2-3 months, you're done. All your debts, except for student loans and taxes, go away. A 13 is a debt where you are in for 3 to 5 years and you are making payments to your creditors of some amount of money. You may be paying them 10 cents on the dollar. You may be paying them 75 cents on the dollar. You may pay 100% of what you owe over these 3 to 5 years, but you are making payments. And that's what Rachel's talking about, is for security clearances, they want to see that effort to repay something to your creditors.
I'm going to expand a little bit, because a Chapter 7, it takes away your personal liability. But if you have a car loan and you want to keep that car, you got to pay for that car. You can't walk away from that. And the same on a house. If you have a mortgage on a house and you want to keep the house, you're going to have to keep up paying the mortgage. And if you're behind on either one when you go into the Chapter 7, you're going to have to work out something with the creditor, because walking away from the debt will mean losing the car or the house. So, the general description of the differences was correct, but please don't think that a Chapter 7 means you never have to pay for the car or the house, because you do.
Correct.
Well, and that's true. And those are called secured creditors. So like Discover Card or Target or any of those cards are generally unsecured. They can't grab anything if you don't pay. But a secured debt such as a house, a car, Nebraska Furniture Mart, the #1 aggressive creditor behind a medical creditor, they're going to come back and take your mattress. So if you buy a mattress at Nebraska Furniture Mart, and even though they can't resell that mattress by federal law, they're going to repossess it because that's their take on that, is that you owe money and you shouldn't be able to keep it. And that's okay. Just know that if you file bankruptcy, you have Nebraska Furniture Mart, a mortgage, or a car, you have to pay the stuff if you want to keep it. So then on this screen is just some guidelines that I pulled from the DOD about what goes into a consideration for a security clearance. So again, foreign influence, sexual behavior, personal conduct, financial considerations, psych evaluations, criminal conduct, etc. So when looking at that, again, if you're looking to increase your security clearance and you have a lot of debt, bankruptcy may be an answer. But it's not always the golden ticket. It's going to rely on the facts that you bring to the attorney to do this. You know, here's my goal is to increase my security clearance. My employer says I need to do this. This is the background on the debt. It's all about the story. You've got to give the attorney enough information so we can tell your story and make you come alive. There are so many faces that come through the bankruptcy court that we want to tell your story because you're unique and the facts turn on that uniqueness. So give us enough information to work with and see if bankruptcy is right for you for a security clearance. These are just some of the different tips of saving. And sometimes good savers start now. And saving, that's always the question. How much should I save? How much should I have? Well, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, it's 2 months of savings. On this particular slide, as we come up, it's 3 months of savings, emergency savings. And emergency savings are how much it takes to survive for 3 months without any employment at all. That means rent or mortgage, utilities, food, whatever you pay, cell phone, all your utilities. How much do you have for that? Ideally, if you can have 3 months set away, that can carry you over if you're terminated and you have to find new employment. But a lot of people can't do that. And a lot of people say, I just really can't save. Well, start by saving all your change. If you have 50 cents left over, start saving that, or start rounding up. So when you buy something for $1.25, take 75 cents and put it in your change jar. You'll be amazed at how quickly that'll start to save. And then just start trying to do chunks, $25 each pay period, and put it away in an account. I recommend like a savings account that you have no access to. You can't pull it over from another account, like maybe Fed can pull it from one to the other. It's a totally separate account, and you have to work to get there. Because if you work to get there and you're really working that hard, you really need that money. But if not, then it's a stopping point for you to actually dig into that savings.
Throw something in here. You have to somehow figure out how to get a good handle on your budget. It's a horrible word, nobody likes it, but the reality is, what do I have coming in? What do I have to pay every month? What do I have left over? And a lot of times that shows you where you also need to look at what am I spending my money on? And it can show you where you're throwing your money away, basically. I had a client come in after he filled out the expense side of his worksheet. And he said, I had no idea how much money I was spending at Quick Trip every morning when I went in for a couple, things of Coke or coffee. And once you know where you're spending your money, you have a good chance of being able to stop throwing money in somewhere where it doesn't do you any good. You don't need the Coke. It doesn't buy you anything. It doesn't get you anything, but those dollars add up, and you might be able to throw it at paying on a credit card or saving for a rainy day or the car loan or whatever. So I think it's really important. My father started us at a very young age keeping a ledger. I mean, that was before the computers. And he went over it with us every week. Okay, where did your money come from? What did you spend it on? And it was the best lesson I could have learned, because I'm now anal about that. But if you aren't thinking in those terms, come up with a way to start thinking in those terms, because that's going to be the best thing you can do to get started on getting those savings going.
As a 7 trustee, when I get bank statements from debtors who have filed bankruptcy and I'm reviewing them, I can tell you that on average, the average person spends about $300 to $400 a month eating out on fast food. They don't even realize it. I look at some of them and it's like a daily thing where they're eating out at a fast food restaurant every single day. But when you drop $10 at Taco Bell for lunch, and the next day you drop $11 at McDonald's for lunch, I mean, and you're doing this plus the quick trips in the morning or the Starbucks or whatever it is. I mean, when I add those numbers, that's, you know, between $300 to $400 per person, for one person a month, just fast food. That's a lot of money to spend on fast food.
It is. And your bank statements, like they said, will tell the story, and visit those bank statements, you know, or if get online, you know, if you have a smartphone or the computer, get online and see where your money's going. And then I had a couple that just got married and they wanted to save up for a honeymoon, but they wanted to pay cash for it. So every time they thought about going out to dinner, they calculated how much they would spend at dinner and they put that money aside. And so that's what they started doing and saying, no, this is really just kind of silly spending is what they called it. And they saved that money that they would have spent, and they saved up to pay for a honeymoon for cash and use it. But on this slide where it just came up here, good savers don't rely on auto pay. I think that's true to a certain extent, but I am a big believer in auto pay. If you can get a certain amount and get used to coming out of your check to go and go into a savings account, if your employer allows you to pull it out of your pay, then you get used to that and you don't see that money and is sitting there building a rainy day account. So I like auto pay for a lot of these things. But again, you have to stay in tune. You just can't auto pay and walk away. You've got to be involved if you want your FICO score to build. And like we said, start small, even if it's $25 a month or $5 a month, or just the spare change. Just start, because oftentimes it's the start that stops you. It's changing that habit. And depending on who you talk to, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 90 days to where it becomes a habit. Just start doing it and reward yourself mentally and say, hey, I'm taking the first steps. Because sometimes really, especially in this pandemic, it takes every bit of courage that we have just to get the heck out of bed, right? And face the day. And everybody's journey for that day and that month is a different journey. So we can't survive by continuing to beat ourselves up. And one of the things that I tell my clients about, and usually I don't preach about this, so forgive me if this offends anybody, but Deuteronomy 15:1 and 2. If you look at any theological writing where it contains Deuteronomy 15:1 and 2 is where God relaxes the debts every 7 years. Every creditor is supposed to relax the debt. Well, I can guarantee you Capital One's not going to do it. But if God has forgiven you, then you've got to forgive yourself. And if you don't believe in God, that's okay too, but you've got to quit beating yourself up. You have tools available that you can use this, and that if you weren't given the knowledge as a kid or in school or anything else, you can't blame yourself for not having the knowledge to get out of this situation. So be grateful to yourself and take a moment and be mindful that, hey, if I start saving 25 cents, my change each day, that will add up. That's more than a lot of people will do. So adjust for life changes, be honest with yourself. That's the best thing, because we've all made mistakes. Be honest. We're all human and we can get out of this situation. And look for deals. I love a Walmart. I love, I just had it in my head. It starts with an A, Aldi's. Aldi's has great food. They have great produce, fresh produce, and it's inexpensive as opposed to like Hy-Vee or some of the others. So look for deals.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what happened there. So use cash or checks. I don't know of many people that use checks anymore, or in some places are not taking checks anymore. Having a budget, we talked about that. This says 3 to 6 months of expenses. And then at the end of this are resources. And I see that my time is probably running out. So these are all the resources that we pulled from. The local one down at the bottom is Veteran Housing Assistance. If you need assistance in seeking housing, it's a great project to reach out to. And then, like I said, if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us. So I apologize for going over, and I think we're done.
Yeah, I didn't see that there was anything on the materials that actually told them how to get in touch with the three of us. So maybe Shara or somebody can share that.
Yeah, well, we'll be happy to share contact information. And then I also will say if you're a veteran looking for an attorney to help you with a bankruptcy, for instance, Military Matters is our program, and the best way to find us is militarymatterskc.org. If you just Google it, we're on the web, and that lists all of our referral partners. So we work with local organizations that will refer your case to us. But thank you so much, all three of you. It was very informative, wonderful.
Thank you for asking us and letting us present.
Yes.
Our honor.
Yes.
Let us know if anybody sees this and has any questions too. We don't mind answering them later.
Absolutely.
Did we have any questions before we go? Did we have any questions we didn't answer?
No, we did not.
No, I looked at the chat. It was no.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've got some ideas for some future programs I think you all could do.
Great.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much and have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.